The Maya were a collection of over 50 powerful city-states in Mesoamerica. They shared a language and religion with a pantheon of gods and goddesses who were appeased with human blood through bloodletting and human sacrifice. Each city, great and small, had its own story and history of alliances and enemies. Until the 1960s, archaeologists thought the Maya were a group of peaceful philosophers studying celestial movements and cycles, innovative mathematicians, talented engineers, and brilliant artists. We suspected human sacrifice and bloodletting rituals were performed, as evidenced from relief carvings on large stone monoliths called stelae, yet we continued to romanticize them. Dedicated archaeologists, historians, anthropologists, and linguists from all around the world didn't give up. Their work spanned decades, multiple continents, and many languages, and culminated into a strong foundation of research. By the 1990s, we could interpret stelae, relief carvings, codices, and murals that covered the walls, tombs, and pottery of the Maya world. The picture that emerged was very different than we originally thought. The glyphs revealed a complex society of kings and queens, ruling dynasties, religious practices, the rise of powerful cities, and eventually revealed a region preoccupied with war. Tikal was a classic period city located in the Petén region of Guatemala, near Lake Pitanitza. Tikal was powerful and successful and known for magnificent public art and the tallest standing pyramid in the Maya world. In fact, they were so successful that it created many enemies who wanted a piece of the pie. We're in the heart of the Mayan world at Tikal, its biggest city. Tikal has a roller coaster history of dominating the region, being subjugated by Calakmul, a rise to power again, revenge, and a world war. We're at Temple 4 in Tikal. This was actually the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere until the turn of the 20th century, standing at 229 feet tall, and it was built in 741 AD. What these girls are doing right here is something you should never ever do on a site. They're actually writing their names on the wall, and I really hope they get busted. We're in the main plaza right now, and this plaza was built with all the buildings facing in. And it had a ton of stelae. Some are still erected over on this side, which you can see they're under palapas. And a lot of them, though, are in the museum, just for preservation purposes. This plaza would have originally had a plastered floor, so it wouldn't have been grassy like this at all. And what archaeologists have found is that there's actually 4 layers of plaster. So it was built, raised up, plastered again 4 times. And so this is the last layer, the highest layer we're looking at right now. Something most people don't know about Tikal is its ongoing battles with Clackamole for power. Calakmul was a formidable city in its own right. It was located about 100 miles north of Tikal in modern-day Campeche, Mexico. It was large and powerful and more concerned with conquest than Tikal ever was. Calakmul is surrounded by 1.8 million acres of jungle. It's a protected biosphere. Archaeologists believe there are over 7,000 structures still hidden in the jungle, although only about 1,000 are visible right now. At its height, Calakmul ruled over 20 cities and 1.5 million people. Calakmul was likened to a superpower, kind of like the US is. And in order for them to build that much political power, they created some very extensive trade networks throughout the Mayan world. How they accomplished that was by building a really good detailed system of roads. And by connecting different cities, they could subdue their neighboring cities and bring them under their political power. At Calakmul, there are a staggering array of stelae erected. And this is what made this site a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There were over 117 stelae found in and around the city. And a stele is just an erected monument. It's a big standing stone, basically, carved with political propaganda, the ascension of kings and nobles, and it really just tells stories about the people who lived here. And Calakmul tended to put them up in pairs, representing a king and a queen, so co-ruling or co-regency. The interesting thing too about Calakmul is it has one of the most recent stela erected in the whole Mayan world. And it's actually kind of nonsensical because at that point, literacy had been so degraded by the time that the Maya Empire was falling that a classical Maya person wouldn't even understand what was on the stele. It was just so nonsensical and illiterate at that point. And it just shows the denigration of their culture. I'm on the top of Structure 1 at Calakmul. It's over 160 feet tall and it commands an amazing vista of the jungle. And in fact, out in the distance about 20 miles on a really clear day like today, you can actually see the tip of El Mirador, a sister city of this city, right out there. Calakmul maneuvered, coerced, and cajoled until they had Tikal surrounded by enemy cities under their control. When political tensions finally came to a head and war broke out, both cities drew their subservient city-states into the conflict and widened the sheer number of people and places involved. They used smaller cities to attack each other, as superpowers do, and rarely came into direct contact. One example is Palenque, an ally of Tikal's. The city is really special, not because of the size of it. No more than 6,000 people lived here at one time, but it's more because of the artistry, the skill, and the inventiveness of the architects. Palenque has over 1,000 structures, 8 waterways, an aqueduct system, one of the richest tombs in the Americas, the second longest glyphic text in the Maya world, and it's only 5% excavated. Palenque had mortal enemies. One was Calakmul. Calakmul didn't agree with the way that Palenque had the ascension of a certain queen or a certain king, and they would come burn the city and squash them. Then Palenque would get strong again, and they'd come back and burn them again. In fact, the architecture we see today at Palenque was the product of building campaigns in direct response to the sacking and burning of the city.
Whenever you're ready.
This is a superb example of a Maya vaulted arch. And what this did is it allowed them to build bigger, stronger arches. And originally there would have been timber pieces connecting on either side, which was decorative, and it was also to make sure that it was strong and wouldn't fall down. Right now we're inside the palace, and this is kind of like the community center of the Maya in Palenque. And it was a really important place because this is where they did all their religious ceremonies, where they sacrificed victims of war. This is where they also took saunas and relaxed. Some of the nobility lived here. And this would have been like the center of the city, the heart of the city. Though Palenque was able to recover from repeated attacks, even they weren't safe from a new war strategy that would rock the entire region. The Maya didn't view war as a clash between people and weapons. They saw it as a complex clashing of religious ideologies and spiritual forces. Star Wars was an innovative way to plan warfare by reading the position of the stars and stationary points of the planets Venus and Jupiter. If the stars were read correctly, the offensive army would certainly defeat their enemies. Star events were recorded on stelae, pottery, reliefs, and murals. It wasn't enough for the Maya to defeat their enemies in battle. They also attacked their ancestors in the spiritual realm. They identified the location of the cosmic portals of their enemies and sealed them closed, effectively cutting the defeated people off from the love, protection, and power of their loved ones. Ongoing war between Calakmul, Tikal, and their alliances ushered in 150 years of darkness. No stelae or monuments were erected, no elaborate tombs or burials were built. In fact, the Mayan world went through a cataclysmic hush, like the whole world was on pause, waiting for the wars to cease.